The Nightingale's last voyage. The HMS Nightingale was no ordinary vessel. It was a masterpiece of human ingenuity and compassion, a towering symbol of hope in an unforgiving galaxy. Its gleaming hull, painted in white with bright red crosses, was visible even from orbit. Every detail of the ship screamed its purpose: healing, not harm. Inside, advanced medical bays hummed with state-of-the-art technology, treating beings of every conceivable biology. The Nightingale was the pride of humanity's humanitarian fleet, a stark reminder of humanity's commitment to life, even in the darkest corners of the cosmos. The crew was a diverse mix of human and alien specialists, their combined expertise covering the medical needs of dozens of species. Captain Elise Marlowe stood on the bridge, her sharp eyes scanning the tranquil expanse of space. She had always believed in the mission of the Nightingale, despite the dangers it often faced. Today was no exception as the ship glided through a contested sector near the borders of the Arican Consortium, a notoriously aggressive race that valued conquest over diplomacy. "Captain, we've received confirmation of safe passage from all regional authorities," said Lieutenant Ikena, a tall, blue-skinned Viralan whose species had a unique talent for decoding diplomatic protocols. He adjusted his neural interface, which blinked faintly behind his temples. "All systems are green." Elise nodded. "Good. Let's make this quick. I don't want to linger in Arican space longer than necessary." The Nightingale was en route to deliver critical supplies and personnel to a nearby outpost ravaged by a biological plague. Over 3,000 lives were aboard, including civilians, medical personnel, and patients, some in critical condition. Among them were representatives from 12 different species, including 75 Arican citizens who had been evacuated from the plague-ridden colony. The ambush. Without warning, alarms erupted across the bridge. Red lights bathed the control panels, and the steady hum of the ship's systems was replaced by the shrill cries of proximity alerts. "Captain, incoming ships on an intercept course," shouted Ensign Rourke, his voice tight with urgency. "4 Arican war cruisers, bearing 080. They're closing fast." Elise's heart sank. "Are they responding to hails?" "No, Captain. They've powered up their weapons," Rourke replied grimly. "Arican warships." Lieutenant Ikena's usually calm demeanor cracked with disbelief. "They gave us clearance. This must be a mistake." Elise's jaw tightened. "It's no mistake. They're looking for a fight." The bridge crews sprang into action, executing orders with practiced precision. Defensive protocols were engaged, shields brought to full power. But the Nightingale was a hospital ship, not a warship. It had no heavy armaments, only basic defenses meant to buy time for escape. Elise knew they were outmatched. A voice crackled over the comms, guttural and sharp. "This is Commander Korak of the Arican fleet. You have violated sovereign Arican space. Surrender immediately or face destruction." Elise stepped forward, her voice steady but firm. "Commander Korak, this is the HMS Nightingale, a hospital ship operating under the Galactic Neutrality Accords. We are unarmed and carrying thousands of patients, including Arican citizens. Your actions are a violation of." The line cut abruptly, replaced by the ominous hum of weapons locking on target. The first strike. The first volley struck with devastating precision, shaking the Nightingale to its core. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles, and cries of alarm echoed across the bridge. Elise gripped the railing to steady herself as a second blast tore through the ship's outer hull, sending debris spiraling into space. "Shields are failing," shouted Rourke. "Hull integrity compromised on decks 4 through 6. Evacuate those decks immediately." Elise barked. "Get the medical teams to the lower levels. Prioritize critical patients." She turned to Lieutenant Ikena. "Send a distress signal on all frequencies. Someone out there has to hear us." Ikena nodded and began transmitting, his fingers flying over the console. "This is the HMS Nightingale. We are under attack by Arican forces. requesting immediate assistance. Please respond. The cost of spite. In the chaos, the Elise couldn't help but feel a deep, simmering anger. The Nightingale was no threat. Its transponder broadcasted its identity and mission on all channels. Its flight plan had been cleared. The attack was a deliberate act of aggression, a calculated strike against the very ideals the ship represented. The Arikan cruisers pressed their assault, targeting the Nightingale's engines to prevent escape. Explosions rippled through the ship, and the cries of injured crew and patients filled the comms. Yet, even in the face of annihilation, the crew of the Nightingale continued their work, refusing to abandon their mission. "Captain," Ikena said, his voice strained, "we've lost long-range communications. The distress signal isn't getting through." Elisa's mind raced. There was no way to outrun the Arikan ships, and surrendering would doom everyone aboard. She had one last option, a risky maneuver that might buy them time. "Set course for the neutral zone," she ordered. "Push the engines to their limit." Rourke hesitated. "Captain, the engines are already strained. If we push them any harder—" "I'm aware of the risks, Ensign," Elise said, her voice cold with resolve. "Do it." A beacon of hope. As the Nightingale limped toward the neutral zone, Elise sent out one final message, a desperate plea for help. She didn't know if anyone would hear it, but she had to try. "To any vessel within range, this is the HMS Nightingale. We are under attack by Arikan forces. We are unarmed and carrying over 3,000 souls. Please, if you can hear this, help us." Her voice wavered for the first time, but she steadied herself. "We will not give up. We will not abandon our mission. Humanity has always stood for hope, even in the darkest times, and we will continue to stand, no matter the cost." In the vastness of space, her words echoed into the void. Somewhere, someone would hear them. The call of the void. Far from the embattled HMS Nightingale, humanity's flagship Eos glided silently through the void of deep space. A colossal vessel of unmatched power and grace, the Eos was humanity's guardian, equipped with advanced technology that combined raw firepower and unparalleled strategic capabilities. On board, Admiral Alaric Voss stood in his command center, surrounded by a sea of glowing tactical displays. The room thrummed with the subdued hum of high-performance systems, each designed to secure humanity's place among the stars. "Admiral, we're receiving a faint distress signal," said Lieutenant Commander Freya Lennox, her dark eyes narrowing as she adjusted the audio feed. "It's fragmented, but I'm patching it through." The crackling voice of Captain Elise Marlowe broke through the static, heavy with urgency and determination. "This is the HMS Nightingale. We are under attack by Arikan forces, unarmed and carrying over 3,000 souls. Request immediate assistance." Freya glanced at Admiral Voss, her expression grim. "Sir, they're in contested space near Arikan borders. It's a hospital ship. They're broadcasting under the Galactic Neutrality Accords." Voss's expression darkened as he processed the information. The Arikans know the rules. Attacking a hospital ship is an act of barbarism. Their leadership must have sanctioned this. Freya hesitated. "Do we have orders to intervene?" "The Nightingale isn't within our jurisdiction." Voss's jaw tightened. "No orders are needed when a line like this is crossed. Plot a course for their coordinates." "Full burn." "Aye, sir," Freya replied, snapping a sharp salute. A war unfolds. As the Eos accelerated toward the Nightingale's last known position, the crew worked in tense silence, preparing for what was certain to be a confrontation. Voss knew the stakes. If humanity let this atrocity stand, it would embolden others to disregard the hard-won accords that governed galactic warfare. It wasn't just about saving the Nightingale. It was about reminding the galaxy that there were consequences for such violations. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Vren, a wiry technician with a reputation for precision. "We've intercepted communications from the Arikan fleet. They're coordinating their attack. The Nightingale's engines are failing. They won't make it to the neutral zone." Voss nodded grimly. Do we have visual confirmation? Vren adjusted the holo display. Yes, sir. The Erican ships are circling the Nightingale like vultures. They've disabled its shields and are targeting the main medical base. The image filled the room. The Nightingale, majestic even in its battered state, drifted helplessly amid the stars. Fires burned along its hull, and escape pods launched sporadically, desperate attempts to save the most vulnerable on board. The Erican cruisers, with their dark, angular designs, fired relentlessly, each shot tearing more life from the crippled ship. Voss's voice was cold as steel. How long until we're in range? 43 minutes at current speed. Freya answered. The Admiral's fist clenched. They don't have 43 minutes. A spark of resistance. Aboard the Nightingale, Captain Marlowe refused to succumb to despair. The bridge was in chaos, but her voice remained steady as she directed her crew. Get the remaining escape pods prepped. Prioritize children and critical patients. Ensign Rourke looked up from his station, his face pale. Captain, we're out of pods on Deck 3, and the Erican ships are targeting anything that launches. Marlowe's mind raced. The Nightingale was equipped with emergency countermeasures, but nothing designed for this scale of attack. Yet they still had one option: the Cryonova Protocol. A last resort system designed to release a massive electromagnetic pulse. It could disable nearby attackers, but it would also leave the Nightingale powerless. Prepare the Cryonova Protocol, she ordered, her voice firm. Lieutenant Ikina's eyes widened. Captain, that will knock out our systems too. We won't be able to steer or send any signals. I know, Marlowe said, but it will buy us time. The crew hesitated for only a moment before springing into action. Marlowe glanced at the tactical display. The Erican cruisers were moving in for the final strike. Activate on my command, she said, her hand hovering over the console. And may every soul aboard forgive me. The Erican ships launched a coordinated volley, their plasma cannons glowing ominously, just as the deadly barrage hurtled toward the Nightingale. Marlowe shouted, Now! The Cryonova Protocol detonated, unleashing a blinding burst of electromagnetic energy. The Erican cruisers flickered and went dark, their systems fried. The incoming plasma bolts dissipated harmlessly into the void. For a moment, silence reigned. But the Nightingale was now adrift, a lifeless husk with no power, no shields, and no way to call for help. Reinforcements arrive. On board the EOs, the bridge erupted in controlled chaos as the Cryonova burst registered on their sensors. Massive EMP detected at the Nightingale's location, Vren reported. The Erican ships are disabled, but so is the Nightingale. Admiral Voss's lips curled into a faint smile. Captain Marlowe bought us time. Bring us in fast. Prepare to launch fighter squadrons and medical teams. We're not letting them die out there. The EOs surged forward, its engines blazing as it closed the distance. Fighter pilots scrambled into their cockpits, ready to engage the moment they entered range. Meanwhile, in the medical bays, teams prepared to receive the wounded, their faces set with grim determination. As the EOs dropped out of hyperspace, the scene unfolded before them. The Nightingale drifted, battered and powerless, while the Erican ships began to flicker back to life. Their engines sputtered, and weapon systems slowly rebooted. It was a race against time. Target the Erican cruisers, Voss commanded. Disable them completely. We're not here to negotiate. The EO's railguns fired with precision, ripping through the Erican vessel's engines and leaving them dead in the water. The Erican crews scrambled to escape, their arrogance replaced with panic. Sir, the Nightingale is unresponsive, Freya reported. Their life support systems are failing. Voss's voice was steady. Deploy rescue teams. We'll stabilize them ourselves if we have to. The cost of survival. As shuttles raced toward the Nightingale, Admiral Voss watched from the command deck, his mind churning. Humanity had always prided itself on being a force for good in the galaxy, but today was a reminder that their compassion often came at a cost. The Arikan attack wasn't just an assault on the Nightingale. It was a challenge to the very principles humanity stood for. "Admiral," Freya said quietly, breaking his thoughts, "we've disabled the Arikan fleet. The Nightingale's crew is being evacuated, but their captain refused to leave. She's coordinating the evacuation from the bridge." Voss smiled faintly. "Of course she is." As the Eos's shuttles docked with the Nightingale, the galaxy held its breath. This was no longer just a rescue mission. It was the beginning of something much larger, a reckoning for those who dared to defy the unspoken laws of war. Humanity's reckoning. The HMS Eos hovered like a guardian angel over the battered Nightingale, its imposing silhouette casting a long shadow against the burning wreckage of the Arikan fleet. On the bridge of the Eos, Admiral Alaric Voss stood at the helm, his sharp gaze locked on the tactical display. The Nightingale was crippled, its life support systems hanging by a thread, but the evacuation was underway. Rescue teams worked feverishly, ferrying survivors from the hospital ship's ravaged decks to the safety of the Eos. "Admiral, we've successfully extracted over 2,000 personnel," reported Lieutenant Commander Freya Lennox, her tone laced with urgency. "But Captain Marlowe refuses to leave the bridge. She's insisting on overseeing the remaining evacuations." Voss's lips pressed into a hard line. "That woman has courage, but she's no good to her crew if she dies with the ship. Prepare a shuttle. I'll bring her back myself." Freya blinked. "Sir, that's a direct risk to your safety. The Arikan fleet may not stay down for long." Voss's eyes burned with resolve. "If the captain of the Nightingale can risk her life to save her crew, the least I can do is ensure she makes it out alive. Ready the shuttle." The last stand on the Nightingale. Aboard the Nightingale, Captain Elise Marlowe remained at her post, her hands gripping the railing of the shattered bridge. Smoke filled the air, and the faint hum of failing systems echoed around her. The once pristine vessel, a symbol of hope and healing, was now a smoldering ruin. Yet, Marlowe refused to abandon her ship. "Status report," she demanded, her voice hoarse but unyielding. Lieutenant Ikena, his face streaked with soot, struggled to stay upright as he scanned the readouts on a flickering console. "Life support is down to critical levels. The last of the patients are being loaded onto the rescue shuttles, but we've got minutes at best." Marlowe nodded, her jaw set. "We'll hold until the last soul is safe. That's our duty." The sound of footsteps broke her focus. She turned to see Admiral Voss, his imposing figure framed by the dim light of the ruined bridge. His uniform was immaculate, his expression unreadable. "Admiral," Marlowe said, straightening instinctively, "I didn't expect you to join the chaos." Voss crossed his arms, his voice calm but commanding. "Captain, your ship is finished. You've done all you can here. It's time to go." "With respect, sir, my place is here," Marlowe replied. "I won't abandon the Nightingale while there are still lives at stake." "You've already saved thousands," Voss countered. "Your crew needs you alive. Humanity needs you alive. Staying here serves no purpose but martyrdom." Marlowe hesitated, the weight of his words sinking in. She glanced at Ikena, who gave her a subtle nod. The crew had done everything possible. It was time to let go. Reluctantly, she stepped away from the console. "Fine. But I'm the last one off this ship." Voss allowed a faint smile. "Fair enough. Let's move." The Arikan counterattack. As the rescue shuttle sped back to the Eos, a new alarm blared through the ship. Freya's voice came through the comms, sharp with urgency. "Admiral, Arikan reinforcements have entered the system. 15 warships, heavily armed." Voss swore under his breath. "What's their ETA?" 7 minutes, Freya replied. "They're moving fast." Marlowe, seated beside him in the shuttle, met his gaze. "The Nightingale can't withstand another attack. And if they reach us, the Eos won't have time to complete the evacuation." "They won't get the chance," Voss said firmly. He activated the shuttle's comms. "Freya, deploy all fighter squadrons. Target their engines and communications. I want those reinforcements crippled before they reach effective range." "Aye, sir," Freya replied. "But even with fighters, we're outnumbered." "Then we'll make every shot count." The battle begins. As the Erican reinforcements closed in, the Eos unleashed its full might. Fighters streamed from its hangars, sleek and deadly, weaving through the stars like a swarm of angry hornets. The Erican warships opened fire, their plasma cannons blazing, but the human pilots were relentless, striking with precision and retreating before counterattacks could land. The Eos itself joined the fray, its railguns roaring to life. The first volley struck an Erican cruiser, tearing through its shields and igniting its munitions in a spectacular explosion. But the Erican fleet was no easy opponent. They returned fire, their combined assault hammering the Eos' shields. "Shields at 70%. Freya reported, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Multiple impacts on the port side." Voss's voice was calm, yet unyielding. "Hold the line. We need to give the rescue teams more time." A desperate gamble. On the bridge of the Eos, Freya's console lit up with an alert. "Admiral, the Erican flagship is charging its primary weapon. If they fire, it'll breach our shields." Voss's mind raced. He needed a strategy, and fast. Then an idea struck him, one that was as risky as it was audacious. "Prepare the Nemesis Protocol," he ordered. Freya froze. "Sir, the Nemesis Protocol hasn't been fully tested. If it fails, it won't," Voss said, cutting her off. "Activate it." The Nemesis Protocol was humanity's secret weapon, a gravity-destabilizing warhead capable of disabling entire fleets by creating localized singularities. It was experimental, untested in live combat, but it was their only shot. The Eos's launch bay opened, and the warhead was deployed. It streaked toward the Erican flagship, its energy signature pulsating ominously. The Erican ship scrambled to evade, but it was too late. The warhead detonated, creating a sudden gravitational anomaly. Ships were pulled off course, their systems overloaded by the sheer force. The Erican fleet fell into disarray, their formation shattered. "Direct hit," Freya confirmed. "Their flagship is crippled, and the remaining ships are retreating." Cheers erupted across the bridge, but Voss's expression remained somber. "Focus on the evacuees. This isn't over yet." The cost of victory. With the Erican fleet in retreat, the final survivors of the Nightingale were brought aboard the Eos. Captain Marlowe stood on the bridge beside Voss, her face a mixture of relief and sorrow, as she watched the Nightingale drift in the distance, now an empty shell. "It wasn't just a ship," she said quietly. "It was a promise that even in war, we could still choose to save lives." Voss placed a hand on her shoulder. "The Nightingale's mission didn't end here. It's a symbol, one that will inspire others to carry on." Marlowe nodded, though her heart ached. "What now?" Voss's gaze hardened. "Now we make sure the galaxy knows the price of breaking the rules. The Erican Consortium will learn what it means to provoke humanity." As the Eos turned away from the battlefield, its engines blazing a trail through the stars, the galaxy braced for the storm to come. Humanity's shadow awakens. The HMS Eos sailed through the aftermath of battle, its sleek form cutting through the debris-strewn void like a silent predator. The echoes of war had receded, but the weight of what was to come pressed heavily on the shoulders of those aboard. Admiral Alaric Voss stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed at the tactical display. The remnants of the Erican fleet had scattered, their arrogance humbled by humanity's precision and resilience. But Voss knew this was far from over. "Status report," he commanded, his voice calm but laced with an edge that sent his crew scrambling. Lieutenant Commander Freya Lennox stepped forward. "The last of the Nightingale survivors have been stabilized in the medical base. We've sustained minor damage, and repairs are underway. The Erican reinforcements have retreated, but long-range scans show increased fleet activity near their home sector." "They're regrouping," Voss muttered. Typical. Bullies never expect retaliation. When it comes, they double down. Freya hesitated. Admiral, do we have orders from High Command regarding next steps? Voss turned to face her, his expression unreadable. We won't wait for orders. The Erekan Consortium just committed a crime that violates every treaty in the galaxy. Humanity doesn't need permission to respond to that. Freya gave a sharp nod. Understood, sir. The seeds of defiance. Meanwhile, in the depths of the Eos, Captain Elise Marlowe sat in a quiet observation bay. Through the wide viewport, she watched the drifting wreckage of the Nightingale fade into the distance. The ship she had dedicated her life to was gone. Its mission cruelly cut short. The loss weighed heavily on her. Permission to join you? A familiar voice asked. She turned to see Admiral Voss, his usually commanding presence softened by an uncharacteristic gentleness. She nodded, gesturing to the seat beside her. The Nightingale was more than a ship, she said, her voice subdued. It was a promise that we could rise above our darker instincts, that even in war, there could be mercy. And that promise still stands, Voss replied. The Nightingale may be gone, but what it represented lives on. The galaxy will remember this day, and it will remember what humanity does next. Marlowe frowned. You mean retaliation? No, Voss said, his tone deliberate. Retribution. There's a difference. Retaliation is about anger. Retribution is about justice. The Erekan Consortium crossed a line they should never have approached. Now, we're going to ensure they understand the cost of their actions. Operation Silent Storm. Voss returned to the bridge, his mind already racing with plans. Humanity had spent centuries mastering warfare, but their strength wasn't just in firepower. It was in strategy, adaptability, and above all, an unrelenting sense of resolve. Commander Lennox, Voss began, his tone sharp. Prepare the fleet for Operation Silent Storm. Freya blinked. Sir, Silent Storm. That's still classified. Are you certain? I'm certain, Voss interrupted. The consortium won't expect it. They've underestimated us for the last time. Silent Storm was one of humanity's most secretive protocols, a series of coordinated strikes designed not to destroy but to cripple. It targeted an enemy's infrastructure, communication, and morale, leaving them vulnerable and disoriented. It was a weapon of precision and creativity, one that only humanity could wield. Freya nodded, her hesitation gone. I'll brief the fleet. We'll be ready. The calm before the storm. The Eos rendezvoused with its task force, a dozen ships of varying classes, each one bristling with cutting-edge technology. Among them was the Sovereign, a stealth cruiser renowned for its ability to infiltrate enemy lines undetected, and the Aegis, a carrier housing advanced reconnaissance drones. Together, they formed a formidable strike group. As preparations began, Voss addressed his officers in the war room. The holographic display showed a detailed map of Erekan-controlled space, highlighting key installations and trade routes. Our objective is clear, Voss said, his voice steady and commanding. We're not here to wipe out their fleets or occupy their worlds. We're here to send a message. The Erekan Consortium thought they could target a hospital ship and walk away unscathed. We're going to make them understand that their actions have consequences. The officers listened intently, their expressions a mix of determination and grim resolve. Among them was Captain Marlowe, who had insisted on staying aboard the Eos to assist with the mission. We'll strike their communications relays first, Voss continued. Then, we'll disrupt their supply chains and disable key military installations. They'll be isolated, scrambling to respond. And when they're at their weakest, we'll deliver the final blow, a message they'll never forget. A message delivered. The first phase of Silent Storm unfolded with surgical precision. The Sovereign slipped into Erekan space, its cloaking systems rendering it invisible to enemy sensors. Its crew launched a series of coordinated cyberattacks, disabling communications relays and scrambling military channels. Confusion spread like wildfire through the consortium's ranks. Simultaneously, the Aegis deployed its drones, which infiltrated supply depots and transport hubs. Key shipments of fuel, weapons, and food were rerouted or destroyed, leaving entire fleets stranded and vulnerable. On the EOs, Voss monitored the operation's progress, his satisfaction tempered by the gravity of their actions. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about ensuring that no one ever dared to target humanity's principles again. As the consortium's forces scrambled to respond, they found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't predict. Their military AI systems were flooded with disinformation, their ships' targeting systems rendered useless by false data. Every move they made was countered before it could begin. The final strike. The final phase of Silent Storm targeted the consortium's pride. Their central command station, Ardent Bastion. The station was a symbol of their dominance, a massive fortress orbiting their homeworld. But even the Ardent Bastion was not invincible. The EOs led the assault, flanked by its fleet. Railguns and plasma cannons roared to life as the human ships engaged the station's defenses. The consortium fought fiercely, but their disarray made coordination impossible. Voss's voice echoed through the bridge as he gave the final order. Launch the payload. A specially designed warhead, carrying a message encoded in its core, was fired at the station. The payload detonated, harmlessly disabling the station's systems and broadcasting a single, unmistakable signal across every Irican frequency. Humanity does not seek war, but we will not tolerate atrocities. The Nightingale was a symbol of hope. You turned it into a battlefield. Let this serve as a warning. Cross the line again, and you will face consequences far beyond your imagination. The message was clear, and its impact was immediate. The consortium's forces withdrew, their will to fight shattered. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity delivered not just a victory, but a statement that would echo for generations. Echoes of defiance. The galaxy stood still, its collective attention fixed on the fallout of humanity's retaliation against the Irican consortium. The calculated precision of Operation Silent Storm had left the consortium's fleets scattered, its infrastructure crippled, and its pride shattered. But aboard the HMS EOs, Admiral Alaric Voss was already preparing for the inevitable next chapter. On the bridge, a subdued tension hung in the air. The EOs had returned to neutral space, its crew tirelessly repairing the damage sustained in the battle. For all the strategic brilliance of the operation, Voss knew this was merely a prelude. The consortium would not sit idle for long. Pride, after all, was their most dangerous weapon. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Freya Lennox reported, her voice breaking the quiet. Long-range sensors have detected unusual activity near the Irican core worlds, fleet movements, resource consolidation, and encrypted transmissions. It's clear they're regrouping. Voss turned from the tactical display, his expression unreadable. They're preparing a counterstrike. They won't admit defeat until they've tried to reassert dominance. Typical. Do you think they'll target another medical convoy? Freya asked, her tone a mix of concern and frustration. They might, Voss replied, his voice low. But this time, it won't be about victory. It'll be about vengeance. The War Council. In the war room of the EOs, a holographic display of the Irican-controlled sectors glowed with ominous red highlights. Key officers gathered around the table, their expressions grim but focused. Among them was Captain Elise Marlowe, her presence a constant reminder of what had been lost. And what was at stake? Voss stood at the head of the table, his commanding presence unshaken. The Irican consortium is wounded, but they're far from defeated. Their current movements suggest they're planning something large-scale, likely targeting a symbolic target to regain their lost pride. Commander Freya Lennox leaned forward. Do we know what their next move might be? Not yet, Voss admitted, but we can predict their methods. They'll aim for something visible, something that will send a message to the galaxy. They want to erase the humiliation we dealt them. Captain Marlowe's voice cut through the room like a blade. Then we make sure their message fails before it even begins. The officers nodded in agreement. Voss's gaze lingered on Marlowe for a moment. The fire in her eyes was unmistakable, a reflection of the same unyielding spirit that drove him. "We'll split the fleet," Voss continued. "Half will hold defensive positions around key humanitarian installations. The rest, including the EOs, will remain mobile. Our priority is to intercept and neutralize any threats before they reach their targets." Freya hesitated. "Sir, splitting our forces leaves us vulnerable." Voss nodded. "It does, but it also forces the Irican leadership to second-guess every move. They'll have to allocate more resources to counter our unpredictability. And unpredictability, Commander, is our greatest strength." Unseen allies. As the council dispersed, Marlowe lingered behind. She approached Voss, her expression unreadable. "There's something we haven't considered," she said quietly. "The galaxy is watching. The Iricans aren't the only ones who noticed what happened to the Nightingale. Other species are evaluating their positions." Voss raised an eyebrow. "You think they'll take sides?" "I think they already have," Marlowe replied. "The question is, which side?" Voss nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. The Iricans are powerful, but they don't exist in a vacuum. Their allies will be watching just as closely as their enemies. If we play this right, we might gain more than just a tactical advantage." Marlowe's lips curved into a faint smile. "If you're suggesting we use diplomacy as a weapon, Admiral, I think you're starting to understand what the Nightingale stood for." Voss chuckled softly. "Don't get used to it. But you have a point. Start reaching out to neutral parties. If they're willing to align, even quietly, it could tip the scales." The Irican Gambit. Meanwhile, deep within Irican space, High Commander Xeric stood before a council of his peers, his clawed hands gripping the edges of the obsidian table. The humiliation of the Nightingale debacle and the subsequent losses during Silent Storm had shaken the consortium to its core. "We cannot allow humanity's actions to go unanswered," Xeric growled, his voice reverberating through the chamber. "They've turned the galaxy against us, weakened our fleets, and shattered our morale. This is a challenge to our sovereignty." The assembled commanders murmured their agreement, but not all voices were in unison. Some questioned the wisdom of escalating the conflict further. Xeric silenced them with a glare. "Our path is clear," he continued. "We will strike where they least expect. Humanity's fleets are spread thin, their resources divided. They think they've outmaneuvered us, but they've only exposed their own weakness." The fleet sprang into action. Fighters roared out of the EOs at hangars, streaking toward the Irican warships in dazzling formations. Their sleek designs made them difficult targets, and their pilots relied on precision rather than brute force. The Irican gunners fired wildly, their frustration mounting as the nimble fighters evaded their shots. Meanwhile, the Sovereign, cloaked in its advanced stealth systems, slipped unnoticed through the chaos. Its mission: to infiltrate the Draxor and disable its command systems. A clash of titans. The battle erupted into a storm of fire and fury. Plasma bolts lit up the void as human and Irican ships clashed, each maneuver a deadly dance. The EOS held its ground, its railguns and laser arrays unleashing devastating volleys. Every shot was calculated, every strike designed to cripple rather than destroy. "Admiral, the Draxor is powering its primary weapon," Freya called out. "It's targeting the colony." Voss's jaw tightened. "Not on my watch. Redirect all firepower to the Draxor's weapon systems. Keep them occupied." The EOS turned its full might on the Irican dreadnought, hammering its shields with relentless precision. The Draxor retaliated, its cannons roaring to life and forcing the EOS into evasive maneuvers. The clash was monumental, the two flagships locked in a battle that would determine the fate of thousands. The Sovereign's gamble. Aboard the Sovereign, Captain Aaron Kale and his infiltration team prepared to execute their daring mission. Clad in adaptive combat suits, they moved silently through the corridors of the Draxor, their every step calculated to avoid detection. "We're nearing the central command hub," Kale whispered, his voice barely audible over their comms. "Keep it quiet. One alarm, and we're finished." The team reached the hub, a sprawling chamber filled with glowing consoles and holographic displays. At its center was the nerve core, a towering column of crystalline circuits that controlled the ship's systems. "Plant the disruptors," Kale ordered. His team moved quickly, attaching small devices to the nerve core. The disruptors were designed to overload the ship's systems, rendering them inoperable without causing permanent damage. It was a precision strike, one that would leave the Draxor vulnerable without risking the lives of its crew. But just as they activated the devices, the alarms blared. "They found us," one of the team members shouted. Kale gritted his teeth. "Hold the line. We just need 30 more seconds." The team held their ground as Erican security forces stormed the chamber. A fierce firefight erupted, the confined space amplifying every shot. Despite the odds, the humans held their position, their training and determination shining through. Finally, the disruptors activated, and the Draxor shuddered as its systems began to fail. "We're done here," Kale said. "Let's move." The turning point. As the Draxor's systems faltered, chaos spread through the Erican fleet. Communications were disrupted, weapons misfired, and coordination broke down. The once formidable formation devolved into disarray. On the Eos, Freida's console lit up with new data. "Admiral, the Draxor's shields are down." The Sovereign succeeded. Voss didn't hesitate. "Target their engines. Disable that ship permanently." The Eos unleashed a withering barrage, its railguns tearing through the exposed hull of the Draxor. Explosions rippled across the dreadnought, and its engines sputtered before going dark. The flagship was adrift, its power broken. The remaining Erican ships, leaderless and outmaneuvered, began to retreat. Humanity's fleet pursued them briefly, ensuring they wouldn't regroup before returning to protect the colony. A new dawn. As the smoke cleared, the Altrius colony stood unscathed. The people of Altrius, who had watched the battle with a mix of fear and hope, erupted into cheers as the Eos and its fleet descended into orbit. Humanity had not only defended the colony but sent a resounding message to the galaxy. No one would threaten their principles without consequence. In the war room of the Eos, Voss addressed his officers. "Today, we didn't just win a battle. We upheld everything humanity stands for: resilience, ingenuity, and the will to protect life. The Erican Consortium thought they could break us. Instead, they've reminded the galaxy why we must never be underestimated." Marlowe stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with emotion. The Nightingale would be proud. This wasn't just a fight. It was justice. The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. The battle for Altrius was over, but the war was far from finished. The galaxy had changed, and humanity was ready to face whatever came next.